Thank you, ISAE FGW, in particular Norman de Parda Arruda and Gustavo Loyola, and the conference organizing team for inviting me today as your keynote speaker. I have followed the work of ISAE FGW since my first trip to Brazil in 2008. Ever since, the team around Norman has championed strong ties and partnership with the UN through the Prime Network. One action stands out. During the 2012 Rio+20 summit, ISAE FGW and the Prime Network in Brazil helped organize a number of events which highlighted the work of business schools supporting sustainable development. It was at that Rio+20 meeting that the world's governments decided to create the Sustainable Development Goals as a follow-up to the MDGs. The SDGs, or Global Goals, were then launched 3 years later in 2015. I've been asked by the organizers to reflect on where we stand in achieving the SDGs today and of course looking forward. Obviously, we are living through some of the most extraordinary months of human history. The COVID-19 pandemic has taken anywhere between 3.5 million to 10 million human lives. It has bettered the global economy and completely changed our lives. Agenda 2030 and the SDGs, adopted 6 years ago, seems like a distant dream. What were the SDGs, the global goals? These were a set of 17 goals and 169 targets which captured a utopian vision of a world without poverty, without hunger, with greater equality, especially gender equality, with access to all for modern sustainable energy, of water and sanitation, with sustainable growth, sustainable cities, and a world where we could take care of our oceans, land, controlled climate change, and did all of this with finance, technology, and cooperation. With the pandemic still ongoing, it is difficult to get a full picture of where we are today in implementing this dream. But what I would like to do today is give you a rough and ready picture, which unfortunately doesn't look very pretty. But I'm also a pragmatic optimist, so please bear with me to the end for some positive news and how you can help to make a difference. Please also remember that the global goals were a set of interrelated goals. They are to be pursued in a collective and integrated fashion. They are applicable to all countries. They prioritize the most vulnerable people and countries, and they emphasize the need to create peaceful and just societies. So where does the world stand regarding the main aspects of the global goals? Poverty. The global extreme poverty rate rose in 2020 for the first time in 2 decades. Estimates are that up to 150 million people have been pushed back into extreme poverty. Ending poverty, one of the clear goals by 2030, looks like an impossible target. COVID-19 has shown the importance of social protection systems to protect health, jobs, and incomes. 4 billion people need such protection. To bring us back on track, given the multidimensional nature of poverty, multiple actions are required, but crucial for all is to give priority to the most distressed people in planning and budgeting decisions. Social protection systems everywhere need also a significant revamp. Second, hunger and sustainable agriculture. Since 2014, hunger has been rising globally. COVID-19 has accelerated this trend, pushing almost 132 million people globally into chronic hunger. All countries are suffering from different forms of malnutrition. 1 out of 4 people in the world suffer from food insecurity, with the highest levels in sub-Saharan Africa. 1 in 4 children under 5 suffer from stunting. More women are suffering from anemia. Agriculture transition is very urgent in our freshwater scarce world. We need better farm systems and a drastic reduction in food loss and waste. Thirdly, health for all ages. The disruptions caused by COVID-19 have halted and renewed all the gains that we have made in several health areas, including maternal and children's health, immunization, and communicable diseases. Now the health sectors everywhere are seriously disrupted. The most extensively affected services include mental health, neurological and substance abuse disorders, TB, HIV, cancer screenings, NCDs, especially hypertension and diabetes, family planning, and malaria. COVID-19 has also shown how unequal our societies and our world has become. It has also revealed how weak health services delivery has become, especially in the poorest countries. The shock we have received is a wake-up call for multiplying our health spending, building our health infrastructure, greater cooperation between nations, strengthening digital health, and look at all that is essential in preventing a recurrence of what we have seen in 2020. Next point, education. The impact of the pandemic on education has been a generational catastrophe. School closings have had a devastating impact. Hundreds of millions are falling behind. 2 out of 3 students worldwide have felt the impact of closures of schools. Those who have no access to virtual learning are hardest hit. Disparities in access to education and learning needs a higher priority, especially in addressing the digital divide. Budgetary allocations to this sector need a drastic ramp up. We have a fight to scores of illiteracy and ignorance. Gender equality. Violence against women and girls has intensified. Child marriage is increasing. Disproportionate burden of household duties on women is increasing. This is happening as women play an increasing role as frontline health providers, case providers, and leading in the response and recovery effort. The COVID-19 crisis presents an opportunity to reshape and rebuild systems to advance gender equality. Efforts need to be redoubled to protect women from violence, including domestic violence, enhance their leadership roles, improve workplace conditions, improve inheritance rights, improve budgeting for gender equality issues. Societies need massive efforts, especially community efforts, to change the position of women. The next point on the SDG agenda is water and energy. COVID-19 has shown how critical safely managed drinking water is to contain the spread of the disease. Sanitation and hygiene services, hand washing is imperative. Countries face water stress, water pollution, degraded water systems. The world is not on track and can get there only with integrated and holistic approaches to water management. 2 billion people lack access to drinking water. 3.6 billion do not have access to sanitation, and 2.3 billion lack basic hygiene services. Clean and sustainable energy are at the heart of COVID-19 response and climate change, but the world, despite progress, is still short of achieving affordable, reliable, sustainable, and modern energy for all. At the core of this effort is the need for the finance industry to address issues around investments in coal and fossil fuels. COP26 in Glasgow will hopefully give a boost to this SDG. Solar, hydropower are the key renewable energy forms which need a push like never before. Economic growth. COVID-19 has dragged the world into the worst global recession since the Great Depression. 255 million full-time jobs have been lost, 4 times that were lost during the financial crisis. Global tourism has collapsed. Apart from the jobs lost due to the crisis, the impact on women and youth was most severe. Manufacturing and transport have been hit very hard. Supply chains have been widely disrupted. Small-scale industry have been bettered. Inequalities. The pandemic is making inequalities of all types worse and hitting the most vulnerable and poorest hardest. The poorest countries are 10 years behind on SDG progress in this area. Refugees were the highest ever in 2020. Thousands of migrants died during their migratory journeys. Cities. The direct and indirect costs of the crisis have been severe and made the goals on sustainable cities even more difficult. Slum dwellers have increased, and the quality and vulnerability of their lives have worsened. Consumption and production patterns. Unsustainable production and consumptions are driving the climate crisis, the pollution crisis, and the biodiversity crisis. Sustainable lifestyles have to underpin future inclusive and equitable development, and we hope that we have learned our lesson and will not slip back into the way we were. Climate change. Total greenhouse gas emissions increased in 2020. 2015 to 2020 were the 6 warmest years on record, putting all the SDGs at risk. COP26 has to show the ambition that we are seeing and spending in the US and the EU in the context of COVID-19. Expenditures have to be driven to create a world where we reach net zero emissions by 2050. Once again, the finance industry must power change, including towards poor countries, to help mitigation and adaptation. Oceans. Our oceans and seas are in deep crisis as a result of pollution, warming, and acidification. These changes are long-term and call for a very urgent scale-up to protect our marine environments and resources through coordinated and effective protection. Terrestrial ecosystems. Land degradation, deforestation, biodiversity loss are having a profound consequence for our well-being and survival. The COVID-19 biodiversity loss nexus is understood, but much better. Much more needs to be done to put the health of our planet at the center of our plans. Peaceful and just societies, and we're coming to the end of that long list here. We are so far from this goal. Millions of people live in fragile and conflict-affected areas. 80 million people have been forcibly displaced. COVID-19 has exposed inequalities, discrimination, and weakened our rights and protection systems. A new Cold War has unfolded. People feel more vulnerable, helpless, and exposed. Violence against children is widespread. Human trafficking is rising. There is no sign of a decrease in bribery and corruption. In the era of COVID-19, the epidemic of fake news, fake drugs, black markets, and life-saving drugs and oxygen is up on the rise. The right to information is being challenged by the right to misinformation. Human rights institutions are being hammered. Last point now, means of implementation and partnership that relates to SDG number 17. The pandemic has provided an unprecedented shock to the global system. Lack of financial resources, trade tensions, technological obstacles, lack of data, a dramatic 40% drop in foreign direct investment, debt distress is squeezing the policy and the fiscal space of developing countries. COVID-19 has shown the importance of multilateralism, global partnerships, the need for a global response to ensure the health and well-being of all, especially in the developing world. But we have fallen short. The need for building back better must rejuvenate this goal. ODA flows must increase. FDI must be reformed and promoted. Investment treaties encouraged. The digital divide fixed. Trade boosted. The quest for better data re-energized. While I do not present a rosy picture, but rather a very worrying one, of the state of the SDGs, I'm an optimist that COVID-19 has served as a wake-up call that will serve as a prompter of serious action for our people and our planet. We have seen great community resilience, the record time production of life-saving vaccines and treatments. We have a solid foundation to build upon. Now our most urgent task is to make vaccines accessible to all and help poorer countries as promised in the 2030 agenda. Governments, cities, business and industry needs to adopt low-carbon, resilient and inclusive development to conserve natural resources, create new and better jobs, tackle gender equality and also other inequalities. We need to step up efforts for better data to guide policy, especially around the SDG targets, and we need to put technology in the service of the SDGs and the poor. Finally, I want to highlight that the UN Secretary General Guterres recently launched a seminal report titled Our Common Agenda in New York in late September, and several actions are designed to accelerate SDG achievement. Many of the key proposals across the 12 commitments that are contained in this report are linked to the objectives of your meeting today around the theme of innovation shaping a sustainable future. They include commitments to improve digital cooperation, re-establishment of the Secretary General's Scientific Advisory Board, strategic foresight and global risk report every 5 years, access to health technologies in low and middle income countries. In connection with the implementation of our common agenda, 3 summits are envisioned over the next years: a Transforming Education Summit, a Summit of the Future, and a World Social Summit. I hope each one of you, in your spheres of influence, will personalize the SDGs. We need a movement embracing all for realizing the Sustainable Development Goals and the world we want by 2030. Thank you very much. Best of luck with your meeting.